Owen, I took us live, and I didn't even put up your modesty shield.
Oh no, no modesty shield. But
Oh
people will
well,
see me before I've managed to adjust my T-shirt.
I know you have the whole ritual before we're supposed to turn the camera on. I'm glad you just got your skin suit on in time.
Well, that's easy. It's roomy. I've just had it let out.
Nice. Oh, good. Well, we're just kind of doing a little pre-show vamping as people join us. I see people are joining us from YouTube, from Facebook, and we've got Twitch streaming as well. I love that. I think that's great. I'm going to turn this music down.
Good.
It's obnoxious.
It's not bad, but it makes me feel like I am watching a PG Friday the 13th inspired movie on ABC in the late 1980s.
Right. Yeah. I definitely feel like it's end of show credits or something, for sure. Hello, folks who are joining us. My name is Troy. I'm your disembodied boy, and this is Owen KS Stephens. He is a good friend, an amazing human being, and also the star of this program, which is ThursdAGE with Owen KS Stephens.
Dr. Bedway just said, hello, ThursdAGers. Is ThursdAGers better than anything else we've used so far?
I like ThursdAGers. It's got a good mouthfeel. We were saying Thursdalians.
And it never seemed quite right.
I just didn't, I didn't feel it. Okay, ThursdAGers feels like a good one. Welcome, Doctor. And Jason Sunday, good ThursdAGE to you, my friend. And we have Brian Irving is here too. Good to see you. Good evening. And, today is, I love this. It's one of the things, I truly, truly enjoy it. It is so much fun that I was even going to create a little jingle for it. But, with me singing. But unfortunately, or fortunately, as the case may be, I was far too busy. I didn't get a chance to do it, but we're going to be, we haven't done this for some time, right?
We have not done this for a while.
Yeah,
you had plenty of time to make a jingle. If you really wanted a jingle, you could have done a jingle.
That's true. Although, I did. I worked with some. Go ahead.
Just be a late night sidekick type thing. So going, stat this.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah, like yeah. So if anybody out there happens to be a embodied, and perhaps you have a musical instrument of some kind, perhaps a didgeridoo, or what's another good one? A recorder, that's great. Or maybe you just have a tambourine, or maybe you just have, your hands. You're going to do some rhythmic clapping, make up a jingle. We'll play it. That's that might be the jingle, actually. But yeah, it is indeed a stat. This I did. You know why I didn't have time to make a jingle?
No, I don't know. Why did you not have time to make a jingle?
Because I made this.
You made this. Oh, neat. It's time for Hey Owen. Let me center myself here. There we go.
That's so good. I like it. You should give us a little thumbs up, This is perfect.
Someone can screenshot that and immortalize that stupid moment.
That's true. And print it out, and then at the next convention that Owen's attending, he will sign it.
That is right about the size for a business card. So I might just have that on the back of a bunch of business cards.
Yeah, it would be neat. I love it.
I get myself a little cardboard sign that says, "Will write game stats for money."
How funny. We can put it up in front. You just talk through the circle. Good to see Chris is here as well. I wanted to make sure that we could see a Jacob Blackmon in the house, because Jacob sent us in a beautiful piece of art, and you're going to bring it to life. You're going to breathe life into its very bones.
Oh, it has bones. See, that's more than I knew.
Yes, shoot. I'm giving away a little spoiler. Spoiler alert. So how would you like to do this? Would you like to kind of explain a little bit of your methodology, or you want to dive right into some to seeing what this is?
So I do think it's worth let's get the stat this there. I do want to talk a little bit about methodology and rights and wrongs. Bones so passe, says Robert Emerson. So there's one big secret that I think people who are trying to create monsters from scratch frequently miss, and it is, to me, it is the most important part of thinking about creating monsters, or stats for anything, actually, be that magic items or new spells or whatever. And it's something that sort of moves away from most of what the rest of games and toys and society expect from us. Like when you are kit bashing a model, right? When you want to make a model that is made from other pieces of something, or you want to modify it, or you want to put magnets on it, everything you do has to come from somewhere, or you have to sculpt it. Or if you're building Lego, right, you can work around shapes, but if there isn't the Lego piece you want, if that doesn't exist, you can't put anything there. And so people are used to the idea that here's a toolkit, and with those tools, everything I need should be in the toolkit. And if I can't get what I want, they frequently blame themselves for not using the toolkit properly. Sometimes you get it's a poor craftsman that blames his tools.
Blames the tools, yeah.
One must remember that a poor craftsman probably can't afford the really nice tools, so let's be a little generous with that. But I think it is just the nature of the beast at this point, with everyone doing things like, hey, here's my build to how to do Spider-Man and GURPS, or here are ways that we can take fantasy age elements and put them together to get a different effect. People tend to forget that one of the great joys, one of the huge freedoms, one of the best parts of a tabletop role-playing game is that it doesn't have to be machine readable. And what I mean by that is you can just make stuff up. You can make up anything you want, and then you just need to have enough rules to interact with it. And I will give an example. Let us say that you really wanted to have a creepy kind of creature. Maybe you've been looking at some of the amazing mashup campaigns that Malcolm has been putting on our website at greenreading.com. I recommend you go and look at those, because those are great examples of putting things together and building something that's more than the sum of its parts. But what you want is a really creepy monster, and you think it would be really neat if this creepy monster could only be seen by people who are tired. You just want to do that. He can only, if you're not tired, you can't see him. So people who are wide awake are constantly complaining that this thing isn't real and there aren't things to fight, they can't see it, or you must have been dreaming, or you're really, really tired. So that's your concept. And then you want to go looking through the books. Hey, what in Fantasy Age lets me have an effect that only impacts you when you're tired? And you don't find it. You may not even find rules for being tired, right? We don't necessarily get that gritty in the game. So all you have to do at that point is make it up, and all you need are just enough rules to interact with it. So you can say to your players early on in that adventure, hey, as a house rule, if you haven't gotten enough sleep, you'll be -1 to all your tests. If you haven't gotten any sleep, you'll be -2. And if it's been a few days of being awake, you'll be at -3 or -4. That hasn't ever come up before. We assume you all get a full night's sleep every night. That's part of the fantasy. But I'm just telling you that now, that there will be these sleep states. The only way I expect you to get into these sleep states is if you tell me, hey, I'm not going to get enough sleep. That's the point. Okay, you've now created the rule. You're not measuring the number of hours. You're not clicking on, okay, you've done one thing, and now you got to wait an hour before you can get back to bed. And if you have a second interruption, you can't get a full night. You're just saying, hey, you guys can stay up, and there will be some penalties, and they'll be based on how long you stay up. And then you just write in the power, hey, this monster does not exist for anyone who is not at least -1 tired. That's for them. Not only can they not see it, they can't touch it. It can't touch them. It is insubstantial. There is no translation between the two. And you're done. You have created a new power. Now, we might go into somewhat more detail than that if we decided to publish this thing, because we won't know, how will you take what we say and what are the other circumstances, and we would want to go look through all the rules and make sure that we hadn't already mentioned how sleep works, etc. But for you as a GM at home, if you want the creepy monster that people can only see when they are tired, you just define what being tired means and how people get there. You don't have to go into a lot of detail. And then you just write that down in pencil on the side of the margin, and you're done. And you can, in fact, take, hey, here's a bandit. This is just about the toughness I want. It's got a ranged attack, a melee attack. But I'm going to have the ranged attack being throwing sand at people because I want it to be a sleep man sand in the eyes type thing. And I'm going to have the melee attack be sucking the breath out of them because that seems like a legend that connects with sleeping a lot. But I'll just have the same attack roll, same damage. I'll just describe it differently, and I write the sleep on the note, and now I have a sleep wraith. It's an exhaustion wraith. If you die while you're extremely tired, there's a chance you become one of these, and it's haunting this town where a brand new energy drink has come out, and everyone is exhausted all the time, and go. And then you just let the players out. That kind of freedom, realizing that as long as there are enough rules to interact with the character sheet and what people expect, a few tests, some target numbers, etc., that's all you need to create a new ability, and one new ability is all you need to turn something into a brand new monster.
I love it. I love it. Hey, I want to say hi to Duke. You made it just in time. We have yet to reveal the beast behind the curtain. We're doing, hey, Owen, stat this. And that was awesome. That is phenomenal advice. And it kind of, it's definitely on brand. It's the don't get too hooked into or sort of dependent on only on the things that are in the book. Like, do some of your own stuff. Look at this.
Jacob's here.
Good.
We're Jacob for the reveal. So for people that don't know, I mentioned last week that if Jacob wanted to, he's a phenomenal artist. I didn't mention that. Everyone knows that. He's a phenomenal artist. He works really fast. He was talking about being able to sketch up something weird for me to have to create game stats for. And I said, if you wanted to do that, just send it straight to Troy. Don't let me see it, and we just do it. So this is a piece of art that Jacob made on his own that he sent to Troy. We don't own it. We're just using it for this.
That's right.
If you are impressed by this, go pay Jacob to make art or back his Patreon so you can enjoy his art early, because he really is a great artist. I'm a big fan of his and his work in the industry. So there's the promo. That's what I don't like paying people an exposure, but he decided to do this, so we certainly want to give him the shout out. And I had genuinely not seen this, so I did that whole thing about monsters you can only see when you're tired, and I have no way of knowing if this will be in any way reasonable.
Interesting that you say exposure, because the way, are you sure you haven't seen this? I mean, this is, we try to make this as family as possible, but I mean, sometimes you gotta,
No, I don't even have a clue what this looks like.
All right. Well, gird your loins, as it were, and here it comes. Ready?
Ready.
And boom.
Holy macanoli. Wow, look at that thing.
Is that good or what?
So that has the classic guardian of the temple kind of feel to it, right? I instinctively feel like I've seen the movie where Ray Harryhausen animated this, and some guys in skirts and sandals had to fight it. That's phenomenal. Okay, so just looking at this thing, as I said, my very first thought is that this is a guardian of the temple or agent of the gods kind of critter. So the first thing I'm going to do is think about where would I want to use this? I mean, this is a thing that has, do they each have 5 arms? 6? They each have 6 arms. All right,
they do, yeah.
It's got 6 necks, and each neck ends in a 6-armed humanoid torso bearing 6 in some cases, different weapons. And here's a fascinating thing. The vast majority of those are swords. Are they all swords? I think they are, in fact, all swords. There's one here in the middle that might have been an axe, but I think that is, in fact, all swords. Duke just wrote, is that a red Kali Wyvern tar?
That's right.
So I want to think about where do I want to use this. And to me, that is definitely a boss monster, right? That is a thing that I want to be able to take on a whole bunch of people all at once. At the same time, I don't necessarily want to have one creature that has 36 attacks around. And there are all sorts of reasons I don't want to do that, not the least of which is I don't want to try to figure out what attack is appropriate that I can do 36 versions of. And that's just a lot of die rolling. But also, that would then be player, 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 whole bunch of this one creature moving, and then player, player in the action.
More like player, player, creatures moves, and then player, question mark?
Jacob specifies, he's right, I didn't notice. There's 5 necks ending in 6-armed Kali women, and the tail, which does also end in a 6-armed Kali woman. So it's not 6 necks, it's 5 necks and a tail.
I gotcha.
Right. Wow. Okay, so
Chris has found the weakness, though. It's that it only has 4 legs. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, otherwise it might trip, right?
Right.
It's already using a lot of brain power, just making sure it doesn't accidentally stab itself
or get tangled up. Yeah.
Right. So here's my very first thought. This speaks directly to one of the things that can be an issue when you want boss monster fights, because to me this is a boss monster fight. This is right. You get there and you've hunted down the priest and you've destroyed all of his allies, and you're at the moment where you're finally going to be able to destroy him, and he says, "Fools, but I have the Kali Ma Guardian that I can summon," and he cuts his hand and this thing springs forth. And maybe this thing then kills the priest, right? Maybe this is a elder horror that no one can control, and it takes care of your previous problem, and then you have to deal with it. I can easily see it the sort of thing where it turns at you and 6 voices speak at once and say, "Are you gods?" And, if you say yes, you have to prove it. And if you say no, it says, "Then die." General Grievous's mom. So when you're doing a boss fight, one of the things you have to think about is the action economy. Whenever you want a single monster to oppose multiple players, you have the potential problem that those players can use their various actions, right? Their attacks and their move actions, their major and minor actions, and their thought process and tactics to gang up on it and do a whole bunch of things in a row before it can respond, because there's just one of them. This immediately makes me think that we could, in fact, respond to some of that by having, rather than one creature, we say, okay, we are going to have 6 creatures, and we're literally going to use some variant of 6 stat blocks, and I'll number them, heads 1 through 5, and then the tail. And when people attack it, I can say to them, okay, are you attacking head 1 through 5? Are you attacking the body, or are you attacking the tail? And then you can kill various elements of it, and that element stops acting during the round. If you kill the body, then it becomes less mobile and you can back up and shoot it. Although probably I would also say that those swords can change into bows. That means that I probably, and this depends on the level of the group, but I probably end up wanting a minor threat or a moderate threat, because I am going to be multiplying it times 6. Now, I definitely want something that is essentially a decent melee combatant, right? I don't need to worry about it breathing fire or flying, or there's already plenty of stuff going on with this creature without me worrying about adding a bunch of different abilities to it. So I can look at NPCs that will have the necessary attack rolls and damage numbers and speed and defense and health and build off that. So I've done this a lot from the Bestiary and from the Fantasy Age basic rulebook. So instead today we're going to pick the Fantasy Age Companion. And looking at it, I'm going to go to Chapter 7, Supporting Cast, and I want a minor or moderate threat as my baseline. And looking at the very first page of new adversaries and other NPCs, pages 105 and 106, I see the first two are the assassin and the cultist. The assassin is a moderate threat, and the cultist is a minor threat. Those sound perfect as my starting point, so I'm going to look at them. The assassin has a dagger, a short sword, and a throwing knife. Great, that handles the vast majority of what I'm going to be able to do, right? And then I don't have to necessarily worry about saying that the swords turn into bows, but just can throw them, and I'll just use the throwing knife stats for it. It's got high ratings in accuracy, high ratings in dexterity. It's got decent fighting, decent intelligence, decent perception. Now, our assassin has brewing as a focus. That's probably not going to come up. I don't need to worry about that, but I also don't need to change it, right? I can just ignore it. And the fact that it's got focusing and brawling and light blades, acrobatics, stealth, searching, tracking, climbing, and morale, those are things I can use. And then the rest of it I can just ignore.
Question for you real quick. How would you handle stealth in a situation like this?
Well, so that is a really good question, and the answer is carefully. So, if, for example, I want it to be possible for the players to try and run away, and if they do, they have trouble knowing if this thing is near them, then I might have originally set up my temple where the evil priestess is going to get killed and summon up this guardian of the god's temples, and say that it's surrounded with a perpetual mist. Once I've done that, I can say, and again, I don't have to have complicated rules for it. I can just decide as the GM, if this thing gets into that perpetual mist, it can walk so quietly, it gets to make stealth checks, so you don't know how close it is to having snuck up on you until it's on top of you. And at the same time, I can say, but it's so big, once it's near you, doesn't matter if it has cover from the mist or anything, you see it. And then that number is something I can use in that situation. Or I could have a labyrinth, right, where people are saying, hey, can I hear it moving around? Obviously, if they have a line of sight, they can see it. But just because it's huge does not mean it can't walk very quietly, preternaturally quietly, in fact. And if I want to do that, that stealth number, that value, becomes a test that I can set it against.
You know what? This is really, really interesting. I have this vision in my head of this mist, and the players are coming upon it, and what they see is a body that's kind of low to the ground like they are, and then they see another one, and then they see one behind, maybe a little taller, and they're like, okay, we've got three baddies to deal with. And then, ta-da, that's great. That is really, really great.
Yeah, and you could even take this piece of art, right, and you could put if you've got any Photoshop skills, put like a 90% mask on everything but that central form so that it's just a few vague lines, and then that central form, and you can tell people, hey, you see this? And they're like, well, I see a torso with multiple arms. I'll get some closer. And then you have a different picture that has more of the mask taken off, and they can see a lot more arms and blades. So I'm like, oh, it's a whole little army. And that's just how you make handouts at home, right? And then finally you say, no, once it steps out of the mist, you see this.
Right. It is just one creature.
Right.
I love that.
But as I said, we're going to run this creature as 7 different creatures. 5 heads, tail, body. So I'm looking at my assassin. So my attack rolls are good. I think 6 moderate attacks. I'm only going to be doing 1 attack per creature, no matter how many swords it has. But we will get to stunts here in a second.
Oh, darn it. So I just want to say, sorry, Stan. I don't know why Facebook is so dumb, but glad you made it.
Oh. So Facebook is dumb. I think we can all agree to that.
Yep.
So I will take that assassin and I'll say, okay, I'm just going to do 7 versions of this assassin. I think maybe 55 health per body, per limb or neck or whatever might be too much. So since I want this thing to be a major threat, but I want the players to be able to chew through it, and you're going to have to kill 7 of it before it's dead, I'm going to say, well, I'm looking at the cultist that's right next to it. That's a minor threat with 25 hit points. This is a moderate threat with 55. I'll split the difference, and I'll say it's got 35 health per section. So when I'm writing this up, I'll just say, I'll write down, neck 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tail, body. Each one has 35 health. And then otherwise it uses the same speed, same armor rating, everything else. My attacks are set. I know that I get 7 attacks a round. I will probably decide that with those long necks, that the necks and the tail can all attack something within, let's say, 4 yards, maybe 5 yards, so it's got a good deal of reach. But then when I'm attacking with the body, which I'm still just going to use the dagger rolls for, it's still going to be just a +6 attack roll and a die 6 +2 damage. But that won't have that 4 yard, 5 yard reach. It will only be able to attack something within 1 or 2 yards. And then if I put this on a battle mat, people will realize, oh, you can attack us from way far away, but getting right up next to it is a little more dangerous because there's additional set of attacks. There is a weakening poison here on the assassin that I'm adjusting. I don't have to use it. There's also a deadly poison. I might decide, hey, the deadly poison, that's too dangerous for 7 of them. Weakening poison, I don't want them all to have a weakening poison, because again, that's a whole lot of poison saves. But Jacob went and gave this thing 5 heads and 1 tail. What is different about the tail, even though it looks the same? So maybe I decide at that point, hey, the tail and its swords, it can coat its swords in a toxin that is on the skin only of the tail. So attacks from that one have the weakening poison. And then I just note on my little sheet, okay, 1 through 5, regular attacks, 5 yard range, body, regular attack, 1 yard range, tail, regular attacks, 5 yard range, comma, weakening poison. That also means that I'm creating a tactical choice for the players when they face this thing. It's not just a giant ball of health and attack rolls. I can be very, very clear. Hey, you see the one that is the tail wiping its blades on the scales of the tail. They come away glistening. And people will realize, okay, the tail has some sort of poison. The rest of these have a ton of reach. If I get too close, the body can attack me. In my opinion, interesting choices are one of the ways to make role-playing in general and role-playing combat in particular fun. That people don't just go, I've got 1 attack, it's always my best choice, I'll roll it, and on we go, and make no concern whatsoever for whether or not there's anything else they could do. The stunt system already plays with that a lot in Fantasy Age, all the Age games, because you might get a stunt and that'll change things up. But having a creature have some part of it that you could disable that has different abilities means that even if the players just decide, hey, we're all going to hit 1 head, then the next head, then the next head, we'll get to the tail and we get to the tail, they will have thought about it. They can have that conversation about it. It's an opportunity for role-playing, right? Your character who's afraid of poison can scream and run away. The character who happens to have a huge stamina focus can say, you know what, I'll attack the tail. Maybe it will attack me back. I'm the one most resistant to poison. And that's the sort of things that are fun for people. Beyond all that, the only thing else I would worry about, the assassin has some rogue abilities. It's got pinpoint attack, rogue's armor, stunt bonuses, pierce armor for 1 point. I don't think I'm going to take any of that because I don't actually think this looks very roguey, even though I'm using an assassin for my stat block. But I can look up the core rulebook and say, hey, maybe it has some favored stunts, right? There are stunts that allow you to attack multiple people. There are mighty blow stunts, so maybe it hits you with multiple weapons. So I pick a couple of stunts that I think are appropriate, and I say, it's got those. And then because this thing has 36 swords around it, I probably say, yeah, and if it gets 5 stunt points, it can attack everyone within 15 feet, within 5 yards, once, and for 6 points, it can attack them all twice. So I've created a new stunt for it that represents having all these waving swords, even though most of the rest of the time, you know, if someone says, well, what's with all the swords? What's it doing with most of them? Well, it's got an armor rating of 3, so maybe it's always using a few swords to deflect. It can throw them, so if someone needs a range attack, I'll just say, hey, it's got 6 swords, lobs one of them, it goes through the air, buries itself in your chest for 8 points of damage. And then I can just keep track on my little sheet, head number 4 threw a sword. And again, that may encourage the players to tactically decide what they're going to do. I could even, if I decided to have personalities, right, maybe the different heads whisper to each other, and I'm saying, there's a wizard back there constantly casting spells at it, and one of the heads turns to the other and just, and then that one just starts throwing swords after sword after the wizard, and now the wizard has to decide, do I want to stop that one, which is now attacking me at range every round, or do I want to keep working on the tail, which we all agreed we'd try and kill first because it's the one with the poison? And again, that's a tactical choice. But I haven't had to create new rules for it. I just decided they have conversations and they do stuff like that. And when each one runs out of its health, that part dies, the thud, but the rest of it goes on.
Interesting. Would you introduce any complications for this creature? Because if one of its appendages dies, that's a weird thing to drag around.
It is, but we're very firmly in Hydra territory here. It's got a speed of 14. I might decide its speed goes down by 1 for every limb you've killed, just because it's having to drag them around. Right. That's also sort of thing that, as a GM, I might not think of in advance. And then if someone says during the game, hey, we've killed 3 of its heads, is it having any trouble moving around? I might think to myself, you killed half of them. It's at half move rate. And you can say at that point, you notice, now that you mention it, you notice that it is not as fast as it's trying to, this is the international symbol for a Hydra, by the way. It's not as fast as it's dragging these corpses around. You can also do things like, hey, if you all run away from it, it's not going to happen in combat. It's too slow. But eventually, it will heal up and come back. And people in the comments are talking about all sorts of things you could do. Jacob mentions, if an attachment is severed, it can function on its own like a Naga or a Merilith. Duke just wrote, King Ghidorah-style personalities all bickering all the time.
Oh, funny.
There are absolutely things you could do with it. And then you got to look at, hey, what do I want to do with treasure? Like, it could turn out that those are actually all one sword, and that sword can produce a version of itself that you can hold or throw. So when it dies, all the swords collapse into one, and then if you've got a sword fighting focused character, he'll discover I can use it as one sword, or I can split it into 2 swords, and I can throw one, and it will disappear after it hits, and I can still use the other one. And now you've created a magic item out of this illustration.
That is amazing. I'm thinking about the idea of if you are you grab that sword and maybe it populates any of the appendages that you have with a sword. Yeah, and then you can throw them. That's so cool. That is very, very cool.
And really, anytime it's time to come up with statting something, you just look at the various elements and you decide what's interesting here, or also what are people going to ask you about. I mean, this thing has 36 armbands. Does it just like the armband, or now that I've had the idea for the sword, maybe all those armbands are one armband that again populates every arm you have, so it just looks like it has 36, and then that does something. Maybe that I will allow that to have some out of combat regeneration for people, or maybe it gives you a stunt advantage whenever you're trying to make multiple attacks, and that's why this creature wanted it. Treasure is an interesting thing to work into. Only 33 armbands.
That's right.
Only 33 armbands. Treasure is an interesting thing to think about when you are looking at something like this monster, because if I'm going to stat up a monster from scratch anyway, and that monster has some equipment in the illustration or the inspiration or whatever I'm taking it from, I like coming up with something that ties to the monster as treasure. So it's not just, hey, I rolled on a table and there's an additional 20 silver and a cup that does a healing potion once a day and a really nice pie that is worth 10 gold, right? You could do that. But here, an artist, in this case Jacob Blackman, has done a phenomenal job, this really interesting, intense critter that has all these adornments. So why wouldn't you want to use those adornments as part of what the monster has? And having already done the swords and the armlets, I might well decide that the neck piece can grow armor on you that will fit you no matter what and always looks the way you want it to look. And now that isn't necessarily powerful, right? I can just decide what, maybe it's got an armor rating of 3. That's it. But it doesn't slow you down any, and it matches your fashion sense. There are absolutely players who will go crazy for this armor doesn't slow me down, and it matches my fashion sense, and it has an armor rating of 3. So that's how you just take all those things together and turn them into something that hopefully will feel kind of iconic. I think one of the fascinating things about this is when I looked at it, I immediately got a Ray Harryhausen Temple Guardian kind of feel for it, because it is so clearly a combination, right, of the 6-armed, 6-sword statue from one Harryhausen movie and the Hydra from another Harryhausen movie.
Yeah.
And I have no trouble. And, when you look at this, you start to think about, well, I want to introduce this as a concept to people early on. So how am I going to do that? Maybe they hear, oh, there is a Temple Guardian. It is the Horde. Oh, so there's a bunch of them? No, there's one of them, but it is the Horde.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is called the Horde. It is the Horde, yes. And then they're like, well, does it duplicate what? Right, they don't know what they're looking at. You could also go a totally different direction with this, right? And you could say, all right, when you first run into it, it's got one neck. Its tail is short and stumpy. That neck just ends in a single body with 6 arms. And when people kill it, that turns into 2 heads. And then if they kill those turn into 2 more heads. And then there has to be some way. And then you've got the classic Hydra, right, where you had to put the fire to the stump of the Hydra so that the heads wouldn't regrow. So you can take it a totally different direction if you want to. I personally just thought the artist has gone to all the trouble to make it look like this, so I will start with it looking like this.
Well, I have a question for you, Owen. How do you introduce? What would this sound like? How would you describe that to players? As they're engaging this.
So if I was not worried about the stealth question, right, I would certainly be talking about the weight of its paws hitting the ground. If I was talking about the stealth question, then I would make a big point of saying this huge claw moves forward, settles down, and with no sound, you'll see it absorb the shock of its own weight. Even though the ground gives under it, it's silent. And all you're hearing are the scissor-like sounds of their blades sharpening and brushing by each other. And it's hard to tell that scissoring sound from the whispers of the various bodies to each other.
Oh, God, that's good.
Snake or snake-like, but I'll say, they're constantly whispering, and you're hearing.
Creepy! This is so great.
And if I've got it, I might even have a pair of scissors, right? That I'll make the scissor noise with. Although I am generally not allowed to game with scissors. That's a rule from the 90s. So usually I don't have scissors on me while I'm doing it. But you just pick something. You could go a different route entirely, right? You could record the guy going Kalima from Temple of Doom, or pick something that is less linked to a real world religion, perhaps. But find some sound spa sound that you like and use it. That is the kind of element that you can throw in kind of at random for mythic magical monsters, right? Because no one is going to look at this and think, oh, that's a part of the normal ecology, right?
Right.
Unicorn, people may well go, well, it's a horned horse. There are things with horses in the real world. There are horses in the real world. That could just be a normal part of the local fauna and nothing magical about it. But if you're going that step further and saying, oh, no, this is a creature of myth and legend and eldritch power, scissor sound effects by using real scissors, someone said. You can take something like this and think about all 5 senses. We know what it looks like because Jacob drew it for us. We just talked about what it sounded like. But you could go a different direction with that sound entirely. You could say its mere presence makes it sound like a roaring bonfire, right? That there are these rippling waves of warmth coming off of it. We don't differentiate between fire damage and other kinds of damage, so you can just tell people it's fantastically hot, right? It could be a lava goddess instead of the guardian of a temple. The colors are constantly rippling, and you hear fire near it, or you hear the sound of thunder, or you hear the sound of Amazon singing like was constantly used in the revised Justice League movie. Just pick anything, and that is the ongoing sound. So that's a possibility. You can think about the smell. Does it have any odor? Is there a strong steel odor or copper, or does it smell gently of tiger lilies? You can pick, or is it the stench of the grave? You can tell people a lot about what you are intending uh, for a monster to fit as an ecological niche based on the sensory input you get them without any rules whatsoever. If you see this and I say you feel heat coming off it, you hear fire, you smell the smell of burning copper, that gives you one idea of where I'm going with it without any rule checks whatsoever. On the other hand, if it shows up and I say you smell strongly cinnamon and you hear soft susurrating sounds, and no matter where it goes, there's sort of a sigh when its feet hit the ground, that has given you as a player a very different visual of the kind of critter you're dealing with, an image in your head. I said all five senses. If someone has a bite attack, they will ask you what it tastes like. I'm not saying you have to decide in advance. Obviously, this is going to taste like a combination of pork and chicken because it's snake and person.
Yeah.
So you can just tell them it's a turkey sausage meatball kind of flavor. And how spicy it is depends on how hot you made the sound.
That's great.
But touch can be relevant. So this thing's got an armor rating of 3, the way I have statted it. And I had suggested that maybe the Neculus is armor that gives you an armor rating of 3. But think about the kind of tactile information people can get when they hit a monster. I freaked out a player really badly once, years and years and years ago, when they were facing something in a big heavy cloak that they thought was just a person. And he swung an axe at it and did some damage. But I said, it feels like your axe head just hit wood. It hit and it bit in a little. There's no sense of cleaving. There's no blood spurting. There's no soft. It's like you're chopping a log. And that made them realize this thing in this cloak, whatever it is, it's not a normal person. Does it seem to be metallic? Does it seem to be made of stone? Do your weapons ring off of it? Do you have that Excalibur echoey sword sound going? Tactile information is often overlooked, but again, if you want people to be thinking of this as a lava goddess, then maybe when they get within 2 or 3 yards of it, you say the heat doesn't actually do damage to you, but it is uncomfortably warm. You're sweating, waves of heat are pouring off it. The ground ripples where feet come in contact with it. Those are all ways that you can convey information and excitement to the players and make one creature feel very, very, very different from another, even if their game mechanical stats are numerically super similar.
Hey, I wanted to also real quickly, while you take a swig of water, I want Ren, do me a favor. Would you drop the link to your podcast? I mentioned you last week, and then somebody, or maybe it was the week before last, but somebody said, "Did we ever get that link?" And so I wanted to make sure I grabbed that from you, and then we can show it on stream as well, so that we can get you some people listening because it's a lot of fun. I like it. Ren mentions that the Untitled Goose.
The Untitled Goose?
Is that the we've talked about murder geese before, but I'm not sure. Was it here or was that on Mutants and Masterminds Monday?
Oh, we've talked about geese everywhere. Geese, especially Canadian geese, are well known to be major threats.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. So we'll have to talk about that. But so this is incredibly evocative. There are some people who are talking about let's see, it was who was that? It was somebody was talking about how if you here we go. David Body was talking about how as they attach at the neck, disconnect the bodies down to nagas, and so as you're winding down this creature, and if you're coming towards the end of this surprising sort of thing that's come out of the mist. From the Untitled Goose game. I see. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So my question is how do you wrap this up in a bow, so to speak? How do you tie all these ladies in? You're in midst of the battle, are you going to pull something like if you chop one of the heads, more grow, or kind of what direction would you go in this for maximum player fun?
So a lot of that is going to depend on the campaign, and I have referred before to a game's wahoo level, and that by that I mean how off the beaten path, unusual, out there is the campaign setting and the expectations for the players. So myself, I look at this and I get a very mythic sense of it, but I also feel like this is already pushing the outer limit of how wahoo mind games normally get.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm giving it a poison attack, I'm giving it a duplicating sword, and it can throw things, and I'm having it whisper. I don't then need it to also be able to teleport, right? It's already a whole bunch of things. Nightcrawler from the X-Men is an example of someone that already seems to have a whole bunch of things going on. He looks
Right.
like a human, and he's a fencer, and he can teleport, and he literally becomes invisible in the darkness. Not he's hard to see, but he becomes invisible
Yeah.
only in the darkness. But he's otherwise a fairly straightforward mutant. So I think you need to look at a thing like this and say, how wahoo do I want to make it? Now,
Yeah.
just because that's my wahoo level doesn't mean that that would be some other GM's wahoo level. And it might not be the wahoo level for every game I ran. So I could easily see saying, hey, every time you kill one of the heads, it slithers off and becomes a weaker creature that is now a spellcaster that can shoot a cone of bees out of its mouth.
Oh.
And then you have to kill it, and there's the constant buzzing of the bees. And if I was doing that, I probably early on, we're talking about sound, would have said that you're always, in addition to the you're always hearing in the background, like it's humming. And then people will realize that there's actually bees inside it. And then I would have decided maybe that all of those things that I decided were brass or copper are actually amber. So you've got an amber magic item.
Right.
And if anyone rolls really, really, really badly against a bee attack, they go into anaphylactic shock. Or when you chop off one of the heads, it explodes, or green ichor sprays out and the whole monster gets a little smaller. There are lots of elements that you can add. What you need to ask yourself is, what does that extra complexity bring to my game? And if the answer is screams of delight and joy from all my players because I'm weirding them out and they love that, that's a great reason to make things more complex.
Okay.
If the answer is they're already going to be going, what the heck? I will have hit their ceiling of fun, shock, and surprise, and anything above that is wasted, or worse, anything above that is going to make them rage flip the table and say, this is stupid. Then you don't go any further. And that is one of the reasons why campaign settings in games tend to have, even if they're not explicit campaign settings, there tends to be a tone the game is going for. If you are playing Paranoia or Toon or Bunnies and Burrows, those all have different feels than if you're playing Call of Cthulhu or Fantasy Age or Modern Age. And Fantasy Age and Modern Age have a different baseline feel than Blue Rose, even though Blue Rose is another age game. There's just a different assumed level of what is the norm, how do things work, what is the focus of the game, which is why Blue Rose has a lot more information and relationship rules and interactions and discussions than Fantasy Age, when your relationship may simply be, does this guy pay me to kill a dragon?
I gotcha. I like that. And I like the advice on how to adjust the woo factor.
Yeah,
I think that's important. That's an important bit of calculus that you should probably have mapped out based on kind of the who your players are before the game starts.
Most of my current players are people I've gamed with for more than 35 years. So I've got not a perfect feel for what they're in the mood for, and they're people, so it can vary, but I've got a pretty good idea. If you don't have a pretty good idea when you're starting with people, there are a couple things you can do. First of all, you can describe what you expect the game to be to them. So if you tell them, in this campaign setting, you will regularly be working for the Bunny Centaur Clockomancy Empire to try and protect them against the poisonous Cobra folks. Who have ray guns that they took from a crashed starship, and that they are trying to get the starship to get up and walk because they worship it as a god. that gives people one sense of what the campaign is going to be like, rather than you saying, in this campaign setting, you will be going into dungeons, which are rooms with no explanation, full of dangerous things and valuables. And that might be all you've got set up for your campaign, but they already know it's got a very different feel. Stan says it always comes back to the bunny centaurs. Not always. Sometimes they're spider goblins instead.
That's right.
But it's just an example. The other thing you can do, if you're not sure, is you can just say, hey, this is a wide-ranging fantasy. There's going to be a lot of stuff. Start at a low level of Wahoo, and then crank it up by a notch, right? Turn it from 3 to 4 on the Wahoo level for an encounter and see how they react. And if everyone goes, I don't know, that guy that was drunk and throwing barrels of booze at us as an explosive attack, that was pretty weird. You're like, okay, they're not ready for bunny centaurs and people worshiping a cracked starship.
So here's a question. So a lot of times I feel like our, GMs in general, they've done a lot of work, they've got a lot of plans, and there are sometimes people who, like, if they don't like your plan, that can be kind of jarring. It can be kind of like, oh shoot, I've worked so hard on this thing that I thought was going to be remarkable, and people are, they're not showing the love. How do you negotiate through that as a GM? Like, do you literally just say, hey, it looks like people aren't having fun, maybe we ought to, or less of a public acknowledgement, and you kind of shift and read the room, or how do you handle that stuff?
So if it's a minor thing and I'm perfectly happy either way, I read the room. So if I feel like that the Wahoo level is normally a 4 and I cranked it to a 6 and people didn't respond well, I crank it back down and I move on. Mm-hmm. But for most cases, if you've got an ongoing campaign, right? Because it's a one thing if it's a one shot. You do your best with the one shot, you run the game, people have fun or they don't. Hopefully they do. And then you all go on and do something else for the next weekend. Fine. There's no real need to try and do a post-mortem if you're at a convention and you're never going to see these people again.
Right.
But if it's an ongoing game, especially if it's people I think I'm going to be gaming with in a lot of different settings with a lot of different things, almost all out of character, out of game mechanic issues, I think are best dealt straightforward, out of character, and without worrying about the game mechanics. So if I'll say, hey, I know that you all reacted a little unsure when I had your Freeport Pirates attacked by people with wooden roller skates and what were essentially baseball bats that were clearly inspired by the 1970s movie Warriors.
God, I loved that movie when I was a kid. Creeped me out.
That's the direction I was thinking of taking the game, with a whole bunch of different gangs that were cults that were based off weird stuff like that. And, some of my favorite side-scroller video games. Are you all not grooving on that? Because I don't have to do that. Or did it just take you by surprise and you're okay with it? Or do you need to think about it? Do you have another opinion? And in my experience, the best thing to do is just be upfront and say, if this isn't fun for you all, but it is fun for me, where do you all want to go with it? I have had players tell us, it's not my preference, but you know what? You're running this game for a few months. It's different. You'll run something else. We really enjoyed your last game. We'll suffer through this. It's fine. I've also had people say, I can't take this seriously. And while I respect your right to do whatever you want, I might not want to be part of that game. And those are two very different attitudes. And I don't want to have to guess. I want to, if I've done any design work, be it on a monster or a campaign or an adventure, and the people that I am presumably trying to help have fun as part of this communal activity don't seem to like it, I want to find out why and see if it's fixable.
I like that. That's solid advice. Very solid advice. Wow, time flew. I literally have been in a trance, Owen. I have been ensorcelled by your phenomenal breakdown of this. One thing that we didn't do is pick a name.
No, we did. I consider it the Guardian of the Temple. I think that's the name.
Oh, God, that's the name.
We also called it the Horde.
Okay, I like that. Okay, great. I like that. Yes, Stan brings up a good point. Who will suffer through this doesn't really bring the fun factor. You might be.
He's not wrong, but I have certainly had players where, like, I've got 5 players in this group. 4 of them love it. One of them is merely okay with it, and they would still rather be here because they want to do this thing with these people and they don't want to change what the other people are having with fun. Did you see?
I'm on it.
Okay. So while in general, if everyone's response is "I'll suffer through it," that is definitely time for a longer conversation. If one person is like, "This is not my preference, but I would rather be here with you all, and everyone else loves it, and I can be okay with it," I'll trust them on that, as long as they don't, go fine every time anything happens in the game.
Right.
And then maybe you go, okay, we run that game for however long that game's going to go, and then when it's over, you're like, okay, we did the roller skate cult Freeport gang war campaign that spilled over a little bit into Battle of the Bands. Perhaps now for the new game, we will do something that is a little more this other person's speed because we've gotten that out of our system. We've already had that. We can do a variety of things.
I'm grabbing another piece of art that was sent in that I find uh, pretty awesome. So hang on with me as we. What a great program this has been. I can't believe that it's been a full hour, and I'm not even. I mean, I could do this, for another hour.
Well, sure, you could. You're disembodied, but I'm having to wear my skin suit, and eventually it'll itch.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You definitely got to move around a bit. Question for you then, as I'm grabbing this art,
Yeah.
tell me about what have you got cooking? What's going on in your world? What are you up to? Anything new? Any kind of Patreon stuff to share? Give us an Owen update.
So I've been doing a lot of Starfinder related stuff on my blog. That's owenksstephens.com. I very much like this show, actually. I took a piece of art today that Jacob did that I had permission to use of a Slender Man, and I did a Slender Man for Starfinder. So if that's your jam, it's been all Starfinder all this week. I do have a Patreon. It supports all of my writing and videos, and we're actually getting kind of close to where I'll start doing one video a month automatically. So
Very
if you
nice.
enjoyed my videos, we're not too far from that. That is patreon.com/Owen KS Stephens. So those are the main things I've got going on. I'll also note that two of the things that we didn't address specifically that a lot of people were mentioning in this because they were adjacent to what we're doing is do we plan to do more Freeport stuff and or more adventure stuff for Fantasy Age? And while we are still working on the revised core rulebook, and that is obviously our number one priority until it's in your hands, more adventure support is definitely on our list of things that we want to do. I'm really excited to get some more adventures for Fantasy Age out there. More Freeport is a maybeability. Maybe it's possible. There are more Freeport adventures that we could adapt. Those adventures have been adapted a bunch already in a bunch of different systems, so you'd kind of need to push sales of the ones that are out there to convince us it was a good idea, but by all means, confuse us with your money. And my view of Fantasy Age and Fantasy Age Adventures is that most Fantasy Age Adventures should be Freeport compatible in theme and tone, even if I don't specifically set them in Freeport. And the core rulebook has, and some of the playtesters have seen some rules that say, hey, if two sailing ships get into a fight, here's a way to handle it without having to come up with rules from scratch. So that's all things that we think will be well supported, and therefore adventure writers will use, and therefore there will be more stuff is Freeport adjacent, even if it's not in Freeport proper.
Which is great because let's see, Philip says they bought all the Freeport stuff.
And we appreciate it very much.
That's right. So yeah, we need to catch up to our friend Philip. I'm ready to share this. You ready to see it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Here it comes. This from our dear friend Stan.
Yep. And if anyone can't read it, from left to right, the word bubbles say, do I have the poison attack? No, you're filled with bees. What's my motivation? Charge! I want to charge! Come on, folks. Whose turn is it? And in the very back at the tail, maybe we're too robust?
I love it. I love that. That's great. Thank you, Stan. we'll need to get some info on Stan and what I've got to actually create something so that I can just click the button. But where can you find Stan?
Just always do a search for whatever website it is and Stanx, STANNEX. So if you want Stan's Patreon, just do a search on Google for Patreon Stanx. If you want his Facebook Stanx.
That's right. Twitter, you'll find him on Twitter, Stanx.
Yes.
That's STANNEX.
Yep.
And you and Stan, you guys have you do something, don't you? Like you get together and do some chatting, some video stuff.
Yeah, so we do What the What normally every other week. So this coming Monday, that's on Facebook. You can see it from my Facebook page, which, in case you didn't know, my Facebook is facebook.com/Owen KC Stephens. And that is a hour-long chat with myself and Stan and my wife LJ, who's our producer, doing the Disembodied voice thing.
Fantastic. All three human beings I enjoy a great deal. The other in other news, we have got what else do we got cooking? You know that we've got the crew hanging out at Gen Con.
Yep.
Yeah, they're at booth 203, and they have Ships of the Expanse. They have, you know what? They've got it all. If you are looking for a thing, they've got it. You need, like, I don't know, some drugs. They've got it. You want some? No, I'm kidding.
The Green Ronin booth is sitting where the Paizo booth normally is. It's not that big, but it's in that location if you're familiar with the Gen Con dealer room layout. Right. And I know they have at least a few of the 500 plus page Pathfinder First Edition Freeport books. And I don't know if they're going to sell out, but obviously today, Friday, those are your best days to get them. You can always try and see if they have any left. And the vast majority of the content in that book is, you know, here's the shop, here are the people that are running it, here's the map, here's the attitude, here's the plot. So while there is some Pathfinder First Edition stuff in it specifically, I mean, we've got classes and spells, etc. A lot of it you can adapt to any setting, Fantasy Age included. And I'm biased. I was the developer on it, but I think it is one of the best big city books out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, and Ren, I saw that you were hanging out at Gen Con. I got to tell you, gutted that we're not there, but also I think that we've got enough people on the show floor doing their thing, and we don't need to necessarily add our, our bodies to this sort of. It looks like everybody. I looked at pictures. Everybody's masked up. Everybody's taking precautions. That is good stuff. So if you're there, come by, say hi. Tell them Owen sent you. And here's a question real quick, and we'll end on this one. Let's see. Yeah, Philip says that Pathfinder book is so good.
It's a great book.
Yeah. Jason Sunday says, when will we start to see in previews of the new Age Core book? Oh yeah, where are we on that?
So as you might have expected, a book this size takes time, and there's a lot of stuff going on with international printing prices and shipping, and there's an internal schedule, and I hope that we stick with it, but I kind of don't want to announce specific dates and times for fear that, I don't know, a worldwide plague breaks out, or a meteor strikes, or I hesitate to even guess what could happen at this point. So we will absolutely be doing previews from it. I'm super excited. Some days I almost burst trying to not tell you about some of the stuff that's in there that I'm happy about. And, our director and one of the owners, Hal, is going to do an amazing art directing job. And we already have a cover that I'm super hyped about.
Yeah.
But it just isn't time yet. So I don't even want to say soon. I promise you, we are going to have a big, loud, exciting run-up. If you have specific questions about it, like, hey, how are you handling the question of where you get bandages from, because the first aid talent notes that you have to have bandages, and I don't see them on the equipment list, by all means ask, and I'll see if I can address them. But for broad previews, that always in motion is the future.
Sounds good. Well, we're going to save some of the, I know people are asking some questions, but we have, Owen's a very busy man. He can't always just hang around making monsters all day. Okay, we've got to let them go. Let them, create. But Owen, thank you. This is a great program, a lot of fun. Always a joy to kind of see you. Again, you remain unflapped. Was super, super fun. Folks, we come to you every Thursday with ThursdAGE. We roll out about 2-ish Pacific. ThursdAGE is, of course, and it's a professional live stream. Put on by Green Ronin Publishing. And we also do Mutants and Masterminds Monday, which is a blast as well with Crystal Frazier and Steve Kinson. And we have so much fun hanging out with you, having these conversations. I want to thank everybody with your questions. A big thank you to Jacob Blackmon for sharing. And once again, do follow Jacob at Jacob Blackmon on Twitter. And then you can check out Jacob's Patreon at patreon.com/Jacob Blackmon. A delight, always fun, and always a little bittersweet to end. You're not Alex Thomas. What's that doing? But always bittersweet to end. But again, Owen, thank you so much. And we'll see you next Thursday for ThursdAGE with Owen KS Stephens. Bye, everyone.
Bye, folks.